2 times the holy ones passed their judgments. Number 1. Enoch and the flood. Enoch warned the people of his time about the judgment of the holy ones. These holy ones are those who come down from heaven with authority to speak for God. Jude verses 14 through 15. It was about these people that Enoch, in the 7th generation from Adam, prophesied when he said, "Look, the Lord came with myriads of his holy ones to execute judgment upon all, and to convict all the ungodly of all the ungodly deeds they have done in an ungodly way, and of all the harsh and cruel things ungodly sinners have spoken against him." Jude says that Enoch prophesied about the Lord's coming judgment against them. Enoch was a man who walked with God amid moral decay in the days of Noah, and spoke of the coming judgment. This verse is intriguing, since it contains a quote from Enoch, who was one of the earliest patriarchs of mankind. Jude recounts a statement made by Enoch regarding the fate of the ungodly apostates. Although Enoch was not a writer of Scripture, the Holy Spirit guided Jude to quote from Enoch, who lived before Noah's flood. Enoch's prediction is quoted as a prophecy that is fulfilled. Enoch made a prophecy that the Lord will one day come to earth accompanied by a large number of holy ones. This seems to refer to angels and/or raptured Christians. Matthew chapter 25, verse 31. But when the Son of Man comes in his glory and majesty, and all the angels with him, then he will sit on the throne of his glory. It is not quite clear to us where this quotation originated, or even if it was once a part of another piece of Jewish writing before it was transcribed here. During the period when Jude was writing, Jewish literature such as the Book of Enoch existed, and it contained a statement that was very similar to Jude's. There are at least 4 different men in the Bible named Enoch. It is only the Enoch mentioned in Genesis chapter 5 verse 18 that the Bible gives any significant information about. This Enoch was the great-great-great-great-grandson of Adam. Jude placed particular emphasis on the terms all and ungodly inside this passage from the Book of Enoch. The Lord, along with myriads of his holy ones, will come to execute judgment upon all, and to convict all the ungodly of all the ungodly deeds. We read, to execute judgment on all. A lot of folks don't put much stock in what God has to say about things. The question of whether or not God will judge a person is nonetheless the most important question in the world. If we are truly accountable to God, then it would be foolish of us not to make preparations to face the judgment that will come from Him. Altogether, Enoch lived a total of 365 years. Enoch walked faithfully with God. Then he was no more, because God took him away. The book of Hebrews talked about the men of whom this world was not worthy. Hebrews chapter 11 verses 5 through 6. By faith, Enoch was taken from this life, so that he did not experience death. He could not be found, because God had taken him away. For before he was taken, he was commended as one who pleased God. And without faith it is impossible to please God, because anyone who comes to him must believe that he exists, and that he rewards those who earnestly seek him. Enoch and Elijah are the only 2 humans mentioned in the Bible who are supposed to have been spared from death by God's choice. It would appear that this privilege was granted to Enoch because he was a man who walked faithfully with God and pleased God. Finally, it reached the stage where God saw that every imagination of man's heart was only evil continually. However, as God, He is incredibly patient and gave them enough warning before taking any action. He was successful in locating the one known as Enoch, who was considered to be the first prophet who ever delivered a message from God. It is stated that Methuselah's father Enoch was a prophet. The message was that God would soon come to judge, and that He would take action against all forms of ungodliness. It started to rain heavily, and floods began. And Enoch's great-grandson, Methuselah's grandson, was called Noah. Methuselah was brought up by a holy parent, Enoch, who walked with God and pleased God to the point that God whisked him away from the world without allowing him to die. And he and his 3 sons spent probably 120 years building a huge covered raft, according to God's specifications. Now there is a significant fact about Enoch that concerns us in this brief discussion. In an era when most of his peers only had the record of their birth and the children they also gave birth to, Enoch is like a breath of fresh air. In the history books, Enoch was introduced like others, but despite the fact that he didn't live as long as some of the other men, his testimony is eye-catching. His description is short, but heavy and weighty. He silently teaches us to passionately seek a close-knit communion and fellowship with God, knowing that as we do this, we will experience God in a new dimension. Number 2. Nebuchadnezzar and the Holy Ones. The Holy Ones and Watchers are portrayed in the book of Daniel, which is set in Babylon. The narrative commences after Babylon's initial assault on Jerusalem, when they looted the city and temple and took a group of Israelites into captivity. 4 individuals from David's royal lineage were among them, including Daniel, who later went by the name Belteshazzar, and his 3 companions. Nebuchadnezzar's life-changing experience began with a troubling dream. The king informed his magicians, but they were unable to decipher it. The king sent for Daniel after everyone else had failed. Nebuchadnezzar's dream had a promising start. He saw a tree grow tall and powerful, and it was so fruitful that it provided for every kind of creature. But soon, the dream became bleak. Daniel chapter 4. Now these were the visions in my mind as I lay on my bed. I was looking, and behold, there was a tree in the middle of the earth, and its height was great. The tree grew large and became strong, and its height reached to the sky. And it was visible to the end of the whole earth. Its foliage was beautiful, and its fruit abundant, and in it was food for all. The animals of the field found shade under it, and the birds of the sky lived in its branches, and all living creatures fed from it. I was looking in the visions in my mind as I lay on my bed, and behold, an angelic watcher, the Holy One, descended from heaven. He shouted out and spoke as follows: "Chop down the tree and cut off its branches. Shake off its foliage and scatter its fruit. Let the animals flee from under it, and the birds from its branches. Yet leave the stump with its roots in the ground, but with a band of iron and bronze around it. In the new grass of the field, and let him be drenched with the dew of heaven, and let him share with the animals in the grass of the earth. Let his mind change from that of a human, and let an animal's mind be given to him. and let 7 periods of time pass over him. This sentence is by the decree of the angelic watchers, and the decision is a command of the holy ones, in order that the living may know that the Most High is ruler over the realm of mankind, and he grants it to whomever he wishes, and sets over it the lowliest of people. This is the dream that I, King Nebuchadnezzar, have seen. Now you, Belteshazzar, tell me its interpretation, since none of the wise men of my kingdom is able to make known to me the interpretation, but you are able, because the spirit of the holy gods is in you. Then Daniel, whose name is Belteshazzar, was appalled for a while, as his thoughts alarmed him. The king responded and said, Belteshazzar, do not let the dream or its interpretation alarm you. Belteshazzar replied, My lord, if only the dream applied to those who hate you, and its interpretation to your adversaries. The tree that you saw, which became large and grew strong, whose height reached to the sky, and was visible to all the earth, and whose foliage was beautiful and its fruit abundant, and in which was food for all, under which the animals of the field lived, and in whose branches the birds of the sky settled. It is you, O king, for you have become great and grown strong, and your majesty has become great and reached to the sky, and your dominion to the end of the earth. And in that the king saw an angelic watcher, the Holy One, descending from heaven and saying, Chop down the tree and destroy it, yet leave the stump with its roots in the ground, but with a band of iron and bronze around it in the new grass of the field. Let him be drenched with the dew of heaven, and let him share with the animals of the field until 7 periods of time pass over him. This is the interpretation, O king, and this is the decree of the Most High, which has come upon my lord the king, that you be driven away from mankind, and your dwelling place be with the animals of the field, and you be given grass to eat like cattle, and be drenched with the dew of heaven. And 7 periods of time will pass over you, until you recognize that the Most High is ruler over the realm of mankind, and bestows it on whomever he wishes. And in that it was commanded to leave the stump with the roots of the tree, your kingdom will remain as yours after you recognize that it is heaven that rules. Therefore, O king, may my advice be pleasing to you. Wipe away your sin by doing righteousness, and your wrongdoings by showing mercy to the poor, in case there may be a prolonging of your prosperity. All of this happened to Nebuchadnezzar the king. 12 months later, he was walking on the roof of the royal palace of Babylon. The king began speaking and was saying, Is this not Babylon the Great, which I myself have built as a royal residence by the might of my power, and for the honor of my majesty? While the word was still in the king's mouth, a voice came from heaven saying, King Nebuchadnezzar, to you it is declared, sovereignty has been removed from you, and you will be driven away from mankind, and your dwelling place will be with the animals of the field. You will be given grass to eat like cattle, and 7 periods of time will pass over you, until you recognize that the Most High is ruler over the realm of mankind, and bestows it on whomever he wishes. Immediately, the word concerning Nebuchadnezzar was fulfilled, and he was driven away from mankind, and began eating grass like cattle. And his body was drenched with the dew of heaven, until his hair had grown like eagle's feathers, and his nails like birds' claws. But at the end of that period, I, Nebuchadnezzar, raised my eyes toward heaven, and my reason returned to me. And I blessed the Most High and praised and honored him who lives forever. For his dominion is an everlasting dominion, and his kingdom endures from generation to generation. All the inhabitants of the earth are of no account, but he does according to his will among the army of heaven, and among the inhabitants of earth. And no one can fend off his hand, or say to him, "What have you done?" At that time my reason returned to me, and my majesty and splendor were restored to me for the honor of my kingdom. And my state counselors and my nobles began seeking me out. So I was re-established in my sovereignty, and surpassing greatness was added to me. A Holy One gave the order to cut down the tree and strip it bare, leaving nothing but a stump. There are several things we can learn from the Watchers and the Holy Ones. First, we see 1. They are God's agent in judgment. According to the Bible, angels have worked throughout history to carry out judgments, directing the fates of nations who have disobeyed God. For example, God used angels in scattering the people of Israel because of their sins. He also used angels to punish Sodom and Gomorrah, as well as Babylon and Nineveh in the end. Angels will also administer judgment on individuals who have rejected God's love at the end of the era. Angelic forces are described as executors of God's judgments by the writer of Hebrews. Angels administer judgment in accord with God's principles of righteousness. Second, they come from heaven. Daniel chapter 4 verse 13. And behold, I saw in the visions of my mind as I lay on my bed, an angelic watcher, a holy one, descended from heaven. Third, they glorify God. Daniel chapter 4 verse 17. This sentence is by the decree of the angelic watchers, and the decision is a command of the holy ones, so that the living may know without any doubt that the Most High God rules over the kingdom of mankind, and he bestows it on whomever he desires, and sets over it the humblest and lowliest of men. King Nebuchadnezzar glorified himself. This runs contrary to what the angels do. The angels said, "So that the living will know that the Most High rules over the kingdom of mankind." Before angels do anything for human beings, they first continue their ministry to God in praise and worship. The Bible gives us several such pictures of angels worshiping God. We have already seen the seraphim proclaiming God to be holy, holy, holy in Isaiah chapter 6 verse 3. The angels provide a good pattern for us to follow. How often do we rush off to serve God or others, perhaps in some good and necessary way, and neglect to first worship God and adore Him? Of course, we should give God and others our every effort in service. But before that, we need to spend time in His presence, getting our hearts tuned up.